Hello, and welcome to this edition of Worldwide Corrections, the show that reveals world issues that many are afraid to speak on. I'm your host with the most, from coast to coast, won't brag nor boast, Captain Lee. Today's topics of discussions are Arizona Deputy Sheriff tackles 15-year-old with no limbs. Why? And New York City Department of Corrections Chief Murphy removed from post. Why?
If you would like to be heard on this program or have issues, questions, comments, or concerns you would like to discuss, call in at 646-994-7527. That's 646-994-7527. And let's talk about it. But keep it short and keep it clean. Stream the Worldwide Corrections podcast on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, and Podbean. Stay updated by following me on Twitter and Instagram. So tune in and let's get busy.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Worldwide Corrections. I'm your host, Captain Lee. So, this Arizona Deputy Sheriff was placed on leave for tackling a person with no arms and no legs. And the person was shirtless as well. Not that really means much, but he was put on administrative leave. Now, the question that I have is, was the officer placed on leave based on the video that surfaced that another person in the home took the video and shared it? Now, this situation happened, if I'm not mistaken, a few weeks ago, and it just hit the air just recently. It was in the New York Times newspaper, as well as the USA Today. So the question remains, why was the officer put on administrative leave? Was he put on administrative leave based solely on the video that surfaced? Was he given a hearing prior to his being placed on administrative leave? And if he was placed on administrative leave based solely on the video, then I would say that officer was not given due process to be heard prior to being lambasted for doing what may be his duty. Arizona state law states that resisting arrest is a felony unless you have something that's called passive resisting arrest, which is a misdemeanor, which carries a jail term of from probation to a maximum of 2 years in prison. And in the article, it stated that the 15-year-old with no limbs was erratic. Matter of fact, the person is, I think if I'm not mistaken, it's a group home or something like a group home. And the person that runs the group home was the one that called the police on the 15-year-old. And when the deputy sheriff arrived at the location, the young man was erratic. He was a little bit irate. And when the police officer asked the 15-year-old with no limbs to stop moving around him in attempts to move away from the officer felt the need to subdue the individual with no limbs, which was caught on video. So Arizona law states you have, if an officer asks you to stop, you must stop. And the 15-year-old did not do so. So the officer felt the need to tackle him. Now, I don't know what the Arizona law is in reference to being videotaped, because I know in certain states it's illegal to videotape an officer. So the 16-year-old that was videotaping the officer doing the tackling was also placed under arrest by the officer. Now, why was the 16-year-old placed under arrest? I have no answer for that. And I would hope that the officer had reason for placing the 16-year-old under arrest. Now, from looking at the video, it doesn't really tell you much. But I'll tell you this. My working in law enforcement, sometimes things may look black and white through video, but there's those shades of mediocrity where that comes into place when you are actually doing the job. And these are shades of mediocrity where it doesn't really tell a story, because the camera can't tell a story because we weren't there. So I'm going to reserve judgment on the innocence of the police officer until he tells his story and see what happens. And hopefully this officer will not embellish his story, because if he does, then throughout the nation, when you have an officer that does something wrong and try to cover it up, there's no difference between what he's doing and what our number 45 is doing. And if I'm referencing 45 because of these impeachment hearings that's going on now. I'm not going to segue into the Donald Trump situation that's going on, but I hope that you understand the correlation that when you do right, you have nothing to hide. When you do something wrong, it shall be revealed one way, shape, form, or fashion. So, we have the 16-year-old that shot the video placed under arrest, as well as the 15-year-old with no limbs. The prosecuting office, after looking at the video, decided to drop the charges on both. And I go back to my line of questioning. Did they drop the charges based solely on the video? Now, on the video, it does show the 16-year-old that was placed under arrest. He had his hands behind his back being handcuffed. And the officer had him cuffed, and the officer threw his elbow into the back of the head of the person that he was arresting. That, under New York state law, constitute assault and harassment, which is on video and can be adjudicated by way of video. So if he's to be charged with anything based solely on the video, I would say that it would be that officer should be brought up on charges for the egregious use of force. And if he's to be put on administrative leave based on the video, I would say that would be a just cause for doing so. But again, give him his opportunity to explain why he did or what he did and why he felt it necessary to do so. It may not make much sense to us as the people in society, but maybe he may have a reason for doing so. I doubt it, based on what I've seen on the video. But at least give the officer the chance to defend himself. And that is not asking a lot based on the way that we give criminals a chance to defend themselves, where you may have a person that's in plain view, on camera, take a firearm and shoot up someone's house. You know they did it. You have witnesses come forth. And they say that this individual did it. But you're still giving their due in court. You're still giving their time in court. Wasting taxpayers' dollars. Is it a waste? Not really. Because we're talking about someone's freedom. We're talking about someone's life being altered. Give them their chance in court. If they decline their chance in court and plead guilty, that's fine. But you gave them the opportunity to defend themselves. What do you think, ladies and gentlemen? What do you think? Feel free to call in at 646-994-7527. Let me know what you think about this case, because these are things that we're talking about, and these things are real. Because easily it could be you. Someone else is in the newspaper today, but that someone else could be you and or someone in your family. And it's easy to point the finger of blame at an officer when chances are the next day you may find yourself in the same predicament. Know your rules and regulations, know your policy and procedure, know your penal law. Very important. Chief Murphy from the New York City Department of Correction was removed from his post. Now, this happened approximately about a year and a half, 2 years ago. And he was removed by Commissioner Joseph Pont, who also stepped down from the department as the commissioner. But prior to him being removed from his post, he asked Chief Murphy to step down as the 4-star chief of the Department of Corrections, and which Chief Murphy had no other alternative, because if you get removed from your post and you're asked to step down, either you step down or you get terminated, and then you lose your pension. So they give you the opportunity to step down and step out. But what's more important at this point is this. What is Chief Murphy doing as of late? You would think that a person that held such esteemed rank in a city municipality would be able to find work, maybe doing someone's security, leading security in a college campus, creating your own job, doing something in the line of private investigations, or you're running a Fortune 500 security firm. Well, it was in the New York Daily News that Chief Murphy found employment in a Rockland County school as a janitor. And in the Daily News, it also stated that his duties were to keep the lunchroom clean. Now, this is not a dig on Chief Murphy, because I happen to like Chief Murphy. He was an officer's officer. He rose through the ranks, and he wasn't out to hurt anybody. But it still begs the question as to why a person that rises to the rank of a 4-star chief of a city municipality cannot sustain himself in regular society. And again, that's not a dig on Chief Murphy, but you would think that you would be able to gain some type of employment that would be congruent to your life's work. So if you ask me why I believe that Chief Murphy ended up doing work as a janitor in a school, cleaning lunchrooms, I'll give you my take on that. And again, if I'm seeing anything that you believe is incorrect or you think is too harsh or you have any questions, comments, or concerns about my statements on this program, please feel free to give me a call and set me straight. And if you're right in what you're stating, I'll put you on the air. But looking at this situation from the inside looking out, most people in this department, the New York City Department of Corrections, they earn their stripes not based on what they know, but who they know. And it's called nepotism. You rise to the top based on not occupational knowledge, but occupational friendship. And you have really nothing to base your climb up the ladder on. It's not job knowledge. And this is why the majority of individuals that retire or leave the Department of Corrections in New York City, they can't swim in the ocean because they don't have the occupational knowledge to swim. They don't have any flippers. They have no oxygen tanks. What they have with them is baggage. A lot of baggage, which aids them in sinking in the occupational world outside of corrections. And this is where a lot of individuals find themselves post-corrections. I've seen a lot of individuals that have retired from the Department of Corrections, New York City. And they find themselves going back to work, either going back to work for the Department of Corrections or doing something that's closely related to the job that they did prior to leaving the Department of Corrections. I saw one young lady, she retired, and she's doing security, 16-hour days in a uniform with a gun on her hip. And the organizations in which she's working for, she's not getting paid nowhere near the salary that she got paid prior to her departure from the New York City Corrections Department. So you got to ask yourself, why? Why are we not ready for prime time? Why we can't sustain ourselves upon completion of your tenure with the Department of Corrections? Well, there's an answer for that as well. We don't prepare for our departure from the Department of Corrections. And again, ladies and gentlemen, this is not a dig on anyone, but I would just say that we have to prepare. First of all, we have to get rid of the nepotism. We have to prepare for your retirement. When I played high school baseball, my baseball coach used to tell us, before the ball is hit to you, you have to have an idea. That way, if the ball is hit to you, you already know what you're going to do with the baseball. Let me give you a scenario. You're playing third base. You have a man on, this is for all individuals that know the game of baseball. You're playing third base. You have a runner on first base. Have an idea comes by way of, if the batter in the batter's box hits the ball and the ball is hit to you, you already prejudged what you're going to do with the ball. If the ball is hit to me, automatically I'm going to throw the ball to second baseman so I can get the lead runner, which is running from first. The second baseman should instinctively turn around and throw the ball to first base. That's having an idea. If you've ever seen a baseball player on television, a ball is hit to him and he looks very confused when the ball is hit to him, that's because he never had an idea. He wasn't prepared. And it's the same thing in life. You have to have an idea based on your situation. So you know that your retirement is coming up. You have to start planning for your retirement. But if you bootlicked your way through the department based on who you knew, once you retire and you go into society, all the employers out there are going to ask, what do you know about security? What do you know about your job knowledge? Because I know I would want to know that. How did you get to the rank that you were? You have all these stars on your chest. What do you know? What do you know outside of corrections? What do you know about security? Outside of corrections? Well, you don't know much. So those stars means absolutely nothing. Then I got to ask those questions. What's wrong with that department that you hire a person to the rank of the chief of the department and you know nothing about anything outside of correctional policy and procedure, security techniques? You're not hireable. It's difficult for me to hire you. You could become the grand high exalted mystic ruler. Means nothing. Because in the outside world, you have to produce. You have no friends on the outside. All your friends are left in corrections. The people that helped you gain the rank of chief. And sadly enough, in the Department of Corrections now, you can gain the rank of chief in 5 years. Once you pass the rank of assistant deputy warden, you can make it to a chief position within 5 years. Try that in the New York City Police Department. It won't happen. It will not happen. I'm not saying there's not nepotism within the police department, but you have individuals that make it, it's very difficult for you to make it to the rank of captain in the police department. You have people that's trying to get to the rank of lieutenant, and it's difficult. But again, that doesn't say that there's no nepotism in the police department, because I'm sure there is. But to join the Department of Corrections and you rise to the rank of 2-star, 3-star, 4-star chief within 5 years of being promoted to the assistant deputy warden, which is the equivalent to the rank of a lieutenant in the police department, is absolutely ridiculous. I've seen one gentleman, he had the rank of assistant deputy warden, again, which is congruent to the rank of lieutenant in the police department. And he left my command, and 2 weeks later, he came back as a 2-star chief. Now, if that's not nepotism, I don't know what is. This man jumped over 3 different ranks, at least 3 different ranks, to become a 2-star chief within the department. Does that happen every day? I don't think so. Would that happen in the police department? I don't think so. So we hide these, and again, I'm not saying that he's not mentally equipped occupationally. I'm not saying that because I really don't know the man that well to say that he's inept. I'm not saying that. But I've seen a lot of individuals that have gained the rank of chief in the Department of Corrections, and I can tell you, job one, these individuals are inept. Not only should they not be a chief in anybody's department, these individuals should not have a shield at all, period. Period. Occupational neophytes, I call them. Occupational social pariahs is what they are. And they stab their own individuals in the back. And that happens because of the nepotism. They rose through the ranks, so they don't really know what it's like. They become misinformed, so far removed from doing the actual job of a correctional officer that it doesn't even matter. The individual that they step on to get to the next rank, it doesn't matter. It's all about getting to the next rank, getting more money, preparing for the retirement. How can you sleep at night? These are some things that I really don't do, but I'm going to just go out there and call them out. Some of these individuals that need to step down in the Department of the Department of Corrections. Mr. Stooks, Miss Jennings, those are just two out of many that need to just go on and move on. Get a job in a supermarket packing bags because they do nobody any good, including the individuals that they're working with. We also need to get rid of Commissioner Brand. These people are social outcasts. They're occupational outcasts because they have no clue. Here's a question for you. With all the collective knowledge in the Department of Corrections, how can this department not be top-notch nationwide? Everybody claims that this is the best department, the best penal system, bar none, in the United States. We're supposed to be the example of what a correctional facility is supposed to be. And looking on the inside, you have to see that it's all fake. It's a charlatan situation. Inmates run the jails. Officers are afraid of the inmates. And that's another talking point. Where are we getting these officers? Where are we getting them? You have more officers being arrested than inmates at this point. A couple of years ago when I was working on the job, we had an officer was let out in handcuffs for bringing in scalpels for the inmates, drugs for the inmates. And this was his statement. I'm glad it's over. I'm glad it's over. How sick can you be? You're glad it's over, but now you have a criminal record. You're going to jail. Promoting prison contraband. Those weapons that you brought in, that could have been your life. You aided and abetted for an inmate to slash and stab you and or your partner and or another inmate. How could you sleep at night? You have officers being slashed. Chances are one of those weapons that you brought in was used to slash an officer. How could you sleep at night? And your only response to being caught is you're glad that it's over. You could have had it over and kept your freedom. All you have to do is quit. This job is not for me. Let me quit. But you chose to try to keep your job and bring in contraband for the inmates. You deserve to get locked up. And sadly enough, I don't wish ill on anyone. my conscience and my character won't allow me to do so. But if you were to get incarcerated and one of those weapons that you brought in was used on you, that's called karma. It's called justice. That's called justice. The same weapon that you brought in, you now become a victim of it. You got to be careful what you're doing. But see, here's the problem. When you hire individuals that are soft that way and cannot do the job, you can't blame the officer that was hired. He's looking for a job. The problem starts from the top down. Why are we hiring so many individuals that have shady characters? It's not only the New York City Department of Corrections. It's not only the New York State Department of Corrections. It's not only the Federal Department of Corrections. It's nationwide. It is nationwide. Officers are getting locked up time and time and time again for contraband, for having illicit sexual contact with inmates, which is a crime. If you don't know that, that's a crime. An inmate cannot consent to sexual conduct. Either way, an inmate cannot consent to giving an officer sex, even if the officer tells you, I'm going to write you up. An inmate cannot consent to it. It's against the law. Two inmates cannot consent to having sexual conduct with each other. It's not permitted. So some of us don't mind forfeiting our freedom because when we're in the street, we have nothing going on for ourselves. And you got the inmates that will play the game on you. Oh, sweetheart, you look so good. Your man don't treat you right. It's a ruse. He knows what he's doing. They teach you that in the academy. And no matter how many times they talk to you about that in the academy, you're going to find someone that's going to fall victim to it. You're going to find someone that has nothing going on in their life at home, and they fall victim to it, and next thing you know, they find themselves on the count. You forfeited your freedom. Now you become booking case number such and such and such and such. Now, when those doors closed, the doors closed behind you. You're on the other side of the gate. I worked with this one corrections captain, and it still stuns me to this day, where she was on video kissing one of the inmates. But what she didn't realize was the inmate had a cell phone and he was videotaping the whole situation. It's kind of scary to know that you work, and sadly enough, I graduated as a captain with her. Never thought that would be her. There's another female that is going to remain nameless because she still works on the job, where she had an inmate in her housing area, and he got sent upstate, the inmate, and while he was on the visit floor visiting her, another officer from the state prison recognized her because they worked together. We graduated together out of the city correction, and he didn't want to stay in city correction, so he went back to state. And he saw her on the visit floor kissing an inmate. And come to find out that she had illicit contact with this inmate. So my question is, why is she still on the job? Why is she still on the job? We have to get rid of the poison. And the only reason why I'm going to reference this next situation is because even though the individual that said it, I believe, is of the devil's den. But when Donald Trump says he wants to drain the swamp, that's what corrections need to do. Drain the swamp. Get rid of all of these individuals that does no good for the department and replace those individuals with individuals that can actually do the job. That's not afraid to do the job. You have to replace these individuals with individuals that's not afraid to stand up to the regime. And that's from the chief on down. There's enough of the passing the buck. We are more stringent on the officers than we are on the inmates. This is like play school for the inmates, where they don't mind coming to jail. If you look around you, you have kids coming to jail faster than ever. Most of their homeboys are in jail. It's not a deterrent. They want to come to jail. You have to make it so these guys, when they think about coming to jail, they get their mind right with the quickness. That's what rehabilitation is all about. Not, yo, son, I went to jail, and I mean, I've heard, excuse my stuttering, but I've heard times when you have inmates being released, and they'll tell you, don't worry, I'll be back in a couple of days. And sure enough, they're right back on your gate. They don't mind coming to jail because they have a lot of power in jail with the gangs. A lot of times, if you really look at it, jail saves a lot of these guys from death. Because if they was in the street, they would be eaten alive. So some of these times, these guys come back to jail just so they can survive, so they can see another day. And truth be told, they're making more money in jail than they would in the street through extortion. You got guys in jail making thousands of dollars through extortion. If you don't believe it, ask somebody. So, Chief Murphy, why is it you're a janitor in Rockland County? All those individuals that know what I'm talking about, ask yourself that question. Why is Chief Murphy working as a janitor in Rockland County? But before you point the finger outward, turn that finger inward. What do you have going on for yourself post-corrections? If you find yourself working 16 hours at a security guard job, or you find yourself in Key Food packing bags, and you have to pack bags, not that you want to pack bags, that you have to make ends meet, you got to ask yourself, were you ready to retire? Retirement sounds good on the tongue. Retirement sounds very good on the tongue. But if you're not ready to retire and you find yourself working harder than you would if before you retired, maybe it wasn't time for you to retire. Maybe you need to rescind your retirement and go back to work for the department. But if you were one of those individuals that was not a strong officer and couldn't stand your ground, maybe the job is not for you. Maybe you need to stay home and look for some other employment. This is the Worldwide Corrections Podcast. Any questions, any comments, any concerns, you can call in at 646-994-7527, 646-994-7527, and stream the Worldwide Corrections Podcast on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, and Podbean. Stay updated by following me on Twitter and Instagram, and always tune in and let's get busy.